It's on vinyl and vision.
Hey folks, thank you for tuning in to the latest episode of Vinyl and Vision. Here we are with episode 61, and our very special guest is Will Johnson. I have been looking forward to this conversation for a very long time. I have known about Will in all of the different bands and projects that he has been part of, some of them being Centro-matic, first and foremost, South St. Gabriel, Marie Lepanto, Monsters of Folk, Johnson Molina. That was a pretty big one. That was a great record. I am a big fan. I have a couple of his solo records as of the moment, on vinyl, of course, and his last solo record was called El Capitan, and this is a great one. Very stripped down, very raw, and kind of mostly acoustic record. Very great record. And Will is currently on tour, so if you are interested in seeing him perform, he's opening up for John Moreland on an East Coast leg of a tour, and it started on the 17th of February in Nashville, so unfortunately we have missed that date, but if you are seeing this today, there is still a chance for you to see him perform live. I encourage you to check his website, will-johnson.com, for all the dates and details, and obviously links to tickets and so forth. I hope to be seeing him in Boston myself on the 24th. Looking forward to it. And just to let you folks know, recording this conversation this night for some odd reason, something happened weird. I don't know what, and I don't know why. Nothing was different than our normal setup, and for some reason the Zoom only recorded Will's video. Sorry. No great loss. You don't get to see me throughout the conversation, but hey, it doesn't bother me. So this is kind of like my point of view, having this conversation with Will. You just kind of see him reacting to my questions and so forth, and you get to see him speak and share his thoughts about a very important record, The Replacements' Let It Be. And it was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. I have been looking forward to it for so long, and I'm just so glad that Will gave me the time to have this with him. I think that it is an incredible insight into the mind and the career of Will, and and it kind of provides his perspective on that band and the importance of that band, which is pretty big, pretty huge. So again, thank you folks. All we ask is that you do what you do with the internet. Please, if you like the show, comment, share, subscribe, like, rate, review, all of those things. It's a very great help to us, and we would really appreciate it. If you care to know more about us, you can visit our website, www.psychicstatic.net. And without further ado, enjoy the show. I just have to say that, I'm so happy to finally be able to get to talk to you.
Well, thank you. That means a ton to me. Thanks for inviting me along. I really appreciate it.
Well, it's just because we've had opportunities to speak, and just, I swear I've never been able to say more than 10 words to you before.
But what? Because of...
Yeah, the last time you were in town, you were playing that house show in Providence, and I was able to come in last minute. Because I couldn't... I thought I wasn't going to go, because my wife had took on this job for evenings, and so I was home with the kids alone, and I was just like, fuck, I'm going to miss Will's show. And then finally I was just like, you know what, I'm just going to ask my mother to see if she'll come by and just watch the kids, and I'm just going to head down there. And so it was literally I flew down there so fast and was able to catch your show, and then I wasn't able to really say anything to you because you started playing pretty much as soon as I got there, and then as soon as you were done, I was just like, I got to go home. So,
but those living room shows, I start them I'm pretty punctual with the starts. I try to be mindful of the parents and the crowd, and maybe folks like yourself that are definitely leaning on childcare and got to get back at a certain time. I think it's because I'm hardwired that way myself.
Yeah, sure. I know. You have kids, so you know the deal. And
Yeah.
the weird part was is that couldn't even clear it with my wife. Like she had no idea there was anything happening and that I may
You're
leave
calling
the
it back up.
house. Yeah, I was just like, I gotta be home before she gets home, or else I'm in trouble.
It's gonna look bad.
Yeah, she'd be like, "Oh, you just skirt off to like some show whenever you feel like it." Like, nah, no, not exactly, but I couldn't help it. I had to go. I had to go there. I had to be there.
Coming back in from taking out the recycling, everything's just fine.
Yeah, we all have our moments, I guess. You know. So let's see. I guess we got to kind of jump right in here because I don't have too much time with you. So
All right.
let's see. I asked you to come on because I wanted to talk with you about a record that was important to you,
Yeah,
and so you chose the Replacements' "Let It Be."
I did.
Like we have kind of been talking about this for a while now, and so the more I've been listening to the record and listening to your own discography, I was just like, at first I thought like, oh, that's kind of a weird choice. I wonder why that would be. You know, I mean, like, but listening to all of your music and your back catalog, especially the Centro-matic stuff, I was just like, oh yeah, I guess I can kind of see it here. I can kind
Yeah.
of see the connection.
There's a little devil may care in a lot of the Centro-matic recordings, especially early on. Uh, that I think some of that early Replacements aesthetic got into, maybe not necessarily with regard to um, mm, kind of the rock and roll factor, or really, or we didn't carry on lifestyles quite like those guys did, but at the
Yeah.
same time, some of that that very raw aesthetic definitely had hold of me for a lot of years. And I
Hmm.
did choose that record because it was a true awakening discovering that record. It's
Mm-hmm.
one of those records that I remember where I was the first time I heard it and who I was with and what I was up to. And I just remember it striking a nerve. I think I was all of 14 years old. And I, I, that record just got hold of me on first listen. It was July of 1984, if I'm not mistaken, maybe August.
Huh.
Just in the back of my cousin's Volvo, and there was something about it that harbored this, and I couldn't really voice it at the time, but looking back, hindsight cleared it up for me. And just going through adolescence and becoming an adult, I was able to reconcile why this record meant so much to me, is because it just hit this perfect crossroads of crassness, but also vulnerability,
Hmm.
of melody, but also this recklessness as well.
Sure.
There was something at every turn of the record that just had me, and I was trying to figure out who the fuck I wanted to be and what I wanted to be in an era of album oriented rock and big arena rock.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the hair metal bands, all that stuff was quite fashionable at the time, and it was a true portal to discover that music didn't have to be done in this arena kind of way.
Hmm.
And I was already aware of Black Flag and the SST label. Husker Du came along, in my life right after discovering the Replacements, and that was just a continuation of it to me. But it told me that you didn't necessarily have to be an MTV hit or play, 14,000 seat arenas to really have a great impact with
Hmm.
music and to have a go with music. It was
Hmm.
very relatable, and it was in that way I knew fast that this was going to become one of my favorite bands,
Hmm.
at least for the time. But that aesthetic and that connection that I had with that record at the time has informed a lot of, it later informed a lot of decisions that I would make with what I wanted out of playing music and with what I wanted out of searching for melody and searching for lyrics that I hoped were compelling. Um,
Hmm.
so it was an instant connection, and it's just one of those crossroads that you remember. And it came at a very formative time when I was ready to start playing music with friends from my high school. And I don't think it like you don't get those you don't get to you don't get that moment back. And that's just where I was when I happened to kind of encounter it, and it stuck with me.
Yeah. So I was thinking, like, I knew that you were young. So I assumed you were probably in your young teens. So you're about 14 at the time, and it's 1984 when you're listening to this for the first time. So, like, before you hear this, where are you musically? Like what else were you listening to at the time? Or
I mean, Van Halen,
yeah,
you know
yeah,
that. And uh, I dig Van Halen. Like I'm
sure,
still fine with Van Halen, and I
yeah,
think
okay,
that there's a role that that music definitely played in my life, and I find a lot of that music still very satisfying. If I hear "Looks That Kill" by Motley Crue on the radio, like it's still got this satisfying effect on me. But discovering the Replacements was it felt like it just felt like meeting friends down the street that you really connected with,
hmm.
and that that rang very true to me. And then a few years later, by the time I'm 15, by 16, 17, my my parents became, they were pretty lenient. They would let me drive on down to Austin and go to shows, and there were a number of clubs down here at the time. Liberty
Hmm.
Lunch probably being the main one that would let you in if you were 16. Just put the big X's on your hand and send you inside and keep an eye on you. But
Yeah.
that's where I got to see the Replacements for the first time, and I guess it was '87. I was a little later. I was Pleased to Meet Me tour, but that was again another great benefit to living not so far from Austin, is that I finally got to start coming down and seeing some of those bands.
So I was curious, like, you know, when you first heard this when you're 14, like, where are you in your life at that time as far as like music is concerned, as far as like, your interest in wanting to make music, and like, were you actually learning anything at that point or playing an instrument?
Yeah, I'm a drummer first. I mean, that's what I
Right.
started with when I was maybe 7 or 8, and then I went to piano a little bit after that, which gave me a little bit of foundation for melody. And then I didn't really start messing around with guitar until I was maybe 16 or 17, and that was just because our guitar player would leave all his gear at the house, and I would futz around on it when everybody was gone.
Mm-hmm.
But I would around that time, I mean, I was pretty obsessive about just putting records on and putting headphones on and learning the records on from behind the drum kit from beginning to end.
Hmm.
I would just play the record from beginning to end, and it didn't matter if it was a record like, say Let It Be, or Try to Play Along the New Day Rising, or something like that, or it was like, I didn't care if it was that or if it was Back in Black, or I mean even like a Rush record or something. I just wanted to learn what I loved about music and
Yeah.
explore as many types of at least kind of rock based bands um, that I could at the time. And so I
Hmm.
sort of wanted to learn how to see those records or feel those records from behind the kit. But man, it was a mixed bag of stuff. I mean, one day it literally would have been like a Joe Jackson record, and
Mm-hmm.
then maybe the next day it was like Squirrel Bait. I was just
Yeah.
trying to absorb. I was literally just trying to like take in everything that I could.
Yeah. How interesting. Well, I mean, it shows. I mean, I think that your discography will show that your interest in all of those different genres of music, and hearing that, I can see like, oh yeah, like that makes sense because I can hear all of those elements throughout the catalog. So this record for me, I feel a little weird about it because I like the Replacements, and as matter of, and like my intro to them, I think, was the Replacements Stink.
Yeah,
And shortly after that, it was Sorry Ma, forgot to take out the trash, and that
yeah,
those are my go tos. Like when I listen to the Replacements, that's what I always listen to.
yeah,
And so at one point I had kind of delved into the rest of the catalog and listened to Let It Be, and I felt kind of turned off by it. Like how did you feel about the rest of the catalog after you kind of found out more about them?
Well, I had to backtrack to the two records that you mentioned, I guess, but the more I learned, the more I learned about the band and the more they evolved, the more I realized that Let It Be feels like kind of it feels like a rite of passage in a way from some of the brashness on say Sorry Mom
Hmm.
to uh, the more melodic stages of that band and the more vulnerable places that Westerberg's songwriting went. To me, it was kind of a merger of the two because you still got stuff like We're Coming Out, and I've got the record here, but you still got, We're Coming Out, and you still got Tommy Gets His Tonsils Out, but also, you know, a couple songs later, you've got Unsatisfied, and of
Right.
course, Favorite Thing, I think, is an admission of sorts. There's something very vulnerable about that song, and
Hmm.
to me, this record kind of embodied both that uncertainty and that vulnerability, but also just that brashness that they were coming out of with, say, Sorry Ma or Sting.
Right.
Um, so to me, it was a kind of an optimum crossroads. I didn't know it was going to be that when I heard it for the first time, sitting on the
Yeah.
back of an old Volvo, like smoking cloves or whatever I was doing. But in hindsight, I kind of see it as that record, I guess.
Yeah. And so how do you feel about the older music? Like do you still like it at all?
Oh, I loved it. I mean, it was great. It was. I just wanted, how it goes. You discover at at a at an impressionable age who your favorite band is, and you want to know everything about what they've done. You want to check out the whole catalog and know everything about them, especially back then where like,
Hmm.
finding music was there was a lot of mystery to it. You'd put on
Oh
your
yeah.
shoes and get out there and buy the stuff. There was
Yeah.
no sitting home listening to it on a laptop. So it was a true interaction, and it was a true event. But I think that made it more exciting and
Hmm.
definitely more rewarding when you found those records. And so, yeah, I wanted to get my hands on everything that they had put out,
Hmm.
and that bootlegs, whatever I could find or whatever people had. I was curious about. It was a true obsession that was starting to take place after I heard, Let It Be, and then of course Tim, and it was just kind of onward from there.
Right. So now you said you got to see them in '86.
It's in '87
Oh, okay. But still, that
when
was
the
pretty
police
pretty early.
kind of mid I don't know, whatever you want to say, midway, I'm not sure. It was Pleased to Meet Me in summer, I think it was summer or fall of '87, and then Don't Tell a Soul in '89, and then All Shook Down, I saw him, and then I saw him in 2014 when they came back around and they were doing some festival stuff.
Right.
Of course, it was just Paul and Tommy, from the original lineup and all, but still, even to see those two hammer out those songs with the other guys, it was deeply satisfying. It was a great
Yeah.
performance. I know
Yeah.
a lot of people would say that ain't the Replacements, but I thought the show was quite good, and I thought
Yeah.
the set list choices were really spot on.
Yeah.
But thinking back, even to that Don't Tell a Soul show, it felt like it would go off the rails a few times, but pound for pound, I thought it was a really good show. And frankly, I I still keep this into adulthood, but I love going to shows where I feel like there's actually going to be a car chase.
Yeah.
There's
Sure.
I like the feeling that something may just go awry at some moment. I don't want the whole
Right.
thing to be trashed, but
Sure.
there's got to be a human element to it
Chaos.
to let me know that the musicians are in the moment, that they're present with
Right.
their audience, and that they're human, and that they're vulnerable, and that they're flawed. And those live shows, especially in '87 and '89, taught me that it didn't have to be nothing had to be perfect. It just had to be felt. It was,
Right.
it was soulful in its way. It
Mm,
was. They were bearing their souls for better or for worse, and
right.
that was quite meaningful to me.
Hmm. That's kind of the biggest thing that I pulled away from them was that, especially for this moment, for this record, though it seems it's been throughout their entire career, they're just like there's this association between like chaos and disharmony, and
Yeah,
like
I think this record is kind of a fulcrum, or it rests on a fulcrum,
yeah,
going from the chaos and from the completely like shambolic shows and the definite like punk rock aesthetic musically over to like it is kind of a gateway into uh, Paul's Paul's and the band's abilities melodically, and it gets it
mm,
sits kind of right in that middle world to my ear.
right.
And then of course you move on with Tim and Pleased to Meet Me, and you start hearing them on the radio, and like I remember the first time I heard him on the radio, and there was a bit of a feeling like, oh no, the secret's going to get out. What are we going to do?
Yeah, right. And they've
The
kind of
secret
betrayed
band's
you a
going
little
to get
bit.
discovered. So it's not going to be as fun anymore.
Right. Yeah, yeah. I think you're right. Absolutely. I mean, this is definitely obviously like a turning point in their career,
Yeah.
musically and songwriting wise. Um, I also wanted to touch on this. I kind of forgot to mention this, but I got your book.
Oh man, thank you very much for checking it out. I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
I'm not done with it. I'm only about halfway through right now.
The fact that you got it, I'm thinking, who know? I mean, it's, who knows if people read it, but it's a big and busy life, so I'm grateful for anybody even considering checking it out. So thank you, James.
Oh, no problem, man. I mean, it's been a pleasure. Like I said, I'm not done with it, but
Yeah.
a couple things, like right off the bat, like kind of just getting the first few pages in, I was just like, I feel like there's something bad's gonna happen here.
Well,
like,
yeah,
like,
it kind of rides that rail for a little while, and
sure, yeah,
it was a long and strange ditch to dig, and it definitely took going home again, like mentally and literally going home again, and kind of exploring some of those highways and byways, and making sure I had a few things in place. But yeah, there's some tension in there for sure,
hmm,
and and some of those characters and a few of those situations are definitely inspired by what I experienced, through my childhood in that particular area of the country.
so, well, congratulations on the book because from what I've gotten so far, it's great, and I'm so kind of impressed by all of the voices in this book. You know, I mean, like
Thank you.
I'm not a good literary person. I don't read a lot,
Yeah,
but considering I know your work, I know your music so well, I was just like, wow, this is like really kind of amazing that you have all of these voices in your head. You literally created all these characters, and they're all working together in unison so well. You know?
that was the tricky part of the puzzle, really, because I would write a chapter or two and then try to figure out. I think when I started writing the book a few years ago, I didn't start at the beginning. I started somewhere in the middle and kind of tried to move outward from a scene that was actually first just a short story, and I decided that I wanted to spend more time with the characters, so I just kind of started to move out
Hmm.
and see the book through. But of course, it's not reinventing the wheel, taking each chapter character by character, but at the same time, it just felt like I tried it another way, and this felt like the most authentic way and the most readable way
Yeah.
to my eyes as I kept going over it. So I did go with just each chapter being a character and how they need each other as much as they sometimes want to completely bail on each other.
So there's one thing that I was thinking about, like considering I'm only halfway through. I just
Mm-hmm.
reached the point where the character Melinda kind of
Mm-hmm.
goes into this bar to meet these strangers, essentially, and so I don't know. The way that it's described is like she kind of is speaking about the bar in like this weird, uncomfortable familiarity, and
Yeah.
so like she knows she doesn't
relate to this place. She's kind of like
Yeah,
talking down about it almost in a sense.
yeah.
So it made me wonder, like, for you personally, like, obviously you put a lot of yourself into these stories and these characters. Did you feel kind of like a outcast in your hometown growing up?
Not particularly, but I definitely, I'm an only kid, and I spent a lot of time on my own. I had good friends that I hung with a lot, but I had to keep myself entertained a lot, and I think subconsciously, I was super into music and I was super into making art, and I wasn't really writing any kind of like I wasn't doing a whole lot of I wasn't doing any kind of you know fiction writing or anything when I was a kid. But I did journal a lot, and
Hmm.
I think subconsciously I was just kind of taking notes about characters. Strong characters were already resonating with me. I was curious as to why that energy was important to me. So I think I carried some of that on into adolescence and adulthood. Um, but there were, it's a town, it's an area where a lot of people typically don't leave the 100 or 200 mile radius that often,
Right. Yeah.
and it's definitely a, a, a poor part of Missouri by and large, and everybody knows everybody, and for better or
Sure.
for worse, that they all have to deal with each other in good ways and in bad ways. And I think I took some of those notes or some of those subconscious notes that I would make as a kid, and even when I would go back as a teenager and a young adult, some of those characters still really rang in my head, and I wanted to get some of that energy into the book for sure.
Hmm.
I needed it to, I knew it wasn't going to be the prettiest picture, and I didn't want to just drag it around and trash it. But at the same time, I tried to be true to that part of the world
Sure.
that I spent a lot of my life in as a kid, and also celebrate some of its beauty. I mean, it's a really like you don't get sunsets like that just anywhere over the soybean and cotton fields, and there's a real kind of broken beauty to that part of the world to me that still means a lot to me.
Well, I think that you've done a very good job with it. I mean, I haven't finished it, but from what I've gotten so far out of it, I think that that rings very true to what you're describing.
Thank you. Thanks for spending time with it. That means a ton to me. And it's not it's a town that's not particularly on the way to anywhere, but I'm finding the more people I talk to that have spent time with it kind of know these types of places a little more than I might have expected.
Hmm.
And it doesn't matter if they're in Oregon or in Missouri or in Texas or in Virginia.
Right.
Um, that American small town energy and those realities of a lot of small towns uh, being kind of gutted, or at
Yeah.
least up against it economically. It's everywhere. It's all over the
Oh yeah.
place.
Yeah, no, I think that there's certainly a universality of it all, like this
Yeah,
desperation, like everyone seems to be desperate to find some calling in their life.
yeah, yeah,
So,
for
I mean,
sure.
I mean, even if we don't live in a small town, I think that that's very relatable. All right, well, I'm anxious to get to the end of it now, but for the time being, we should get into this record. So,
Okay.
let's start off with the first track, "I Will Dare." So now, like I was saying before, I think my initial reaction to this album was that the sound quality is kind of not there for me. So I think that's what threw me from when I initially started to listen to it.
Yeah,
But but then I started kind of sitting with it more now, and I was just like, okay, yeah, I hear these songs. I hear how good these are. So Paul Westerberg is quoted as saying at the time he wrote this song, "I Will Dare," it was the greatest song he had written. So, is there a song in your catalog that you have had a similar feeling?
not offhand. I mean, there's not one that comes to mind. I mean, I remember feeling, at certain times I was 26, 27, thinking, okay, that's the best one I've written. Okay, wait, maybe that's the best one I've written, but clearly they don't. I don't
Nothing,
have
nothing
them.
that stood up like some
Nothing
ones
that's
that you
come
thought at that time.
No, no. Um, those were fleeting, fleeting situations where I just moved on and kept writing, I guess.
Right, right.
um, there is something about this song as an opener that I think is, I mean, it's poetic in its way because it's a statement. It's a statement right off the top of the record.
Sure.
Uh, you'll dare to do what exactly? And I'll dare if you will. And if you'll do it, I will.
Hmm.
But it's, I think it's an interesting suggestion, and it's an interesting, it's almost like mm, a call for solidarity right out of the gates. I'm in this if you are,
Hmm.
so
Yeah.
here we go. And so I've always liked it as an opener to this record.
Now, what I've also read as far as the song was concerned was that it seems that like the whole concept of "I will dare" kind of takes on two meanings, and I think that the meaning that you took away from it makes a lot of sense. There's also the aspect that they really kind of had this, I guess like a devil may care attitude. Like they kind of really didn't. We're kind of trying to push the boundaries, I guess, is essentially what it is, and so that's kind of
Right.
where I take that I will dare, like I almost like I dare you to enjoy our music, right, and dare you to
Right.
try to, to get anything out of this,
There's
some
so much to that. I'll dare
yeah,
to completely trash this show. I'll
right,
dare to infuriate our old fans because I'm now going to write pop songs and explore melody and things that aren't seen as punk rock.
exactly,
I'll
yeah,
dare to completely make a fool of myself. I'll dare to pull this off, maybe.
right,
There's just a lot to that I think is it's poetic in its way.
oh, absolutely.
A
So
friend called it Shakespearean, even.
really, ooh, well, that's
Yeah,
a bit much, I
he
think,
took
but
it to
yeah.
that level.
Well, so that led me to wonder, like, can you think of a moment in your musical history that you had quote unquote dared yourself?
hmm Definitely the very first Centro-matic show. I kind of got dared into it, but it was still a similar. There's a similar mood to it in that in February of '96, I want to say, I gave my old friend who was the local promoter and at this Denton club called the Argo. I gave him a cassette of a bunch of songs I'd been, working on around the house, and I'd put out a couple of 7-inch records, or I put out one at that point. Um, but I gave him some music, and he came back maybe a couple of days later, called me and said, "Hey, I've got you booked, March 6th down at the Argo with these two bands." And I said, "Absolutely not. No way. I'm not into doing this live. I just want to make music at the house and like give this stuff out. Maybe put out some 7 inches, maybe even a full length one day, and then I'm going to go to grad school."
Mm.
And he said, "No, no, it's too late because I've already put flyers up all over town, and you're doing the show." And so I think I had 2.5 or 3 weeks to prepare, how to play a live show. And so I worked on it every single day after school, and
Right.
went down to the rock club that night with my amp and my guitar and played, a completely overdriven, loud electric solo show. And I took my glasses off so that I wouldn't have to see the whites of anyone's eyes because I was terrified. But it became this sort of dare, I guess, to see if I could get myself through it.
Right.
And that led to a lot more shows and a band and, just doing music. So, yeah, it was, he essentially dared me. So yeah, if there is a song, I don't know, that song pertains to a certain moment in my own musical time. There have been
Yeah.
many others, but that's the first big one.
Okay. So the next song is Favorite Thing, and you know what?
Yeah.
I like this song. I can't think of anything about this song because you were kind of mentioning it earlier. Um, so I guess I'd love to hear kind of like what it is that you thought about this song.
It's romantic. You know, it's
Yeah.
vulnerable and it's romantic.
Right.
Um, it takes a lot to sing the words "You're my favorite thing." Of course, he
Hmm.
follows it up with "I'm nothing." You know,
Right.
so but it takes a lot, and I thought that was. I still think that that's an incredibly romantic song.
Hmm.
The more that song started to speak to me, like, man, this is quite a loving sentiment in a way. And then, you know, there's the
Right.
self-deprecating "I'm nothing," but therein lies the adolescent uncertainty that spoke to me so much.
Sure, sure. And plus, you can see that Paul has this some sensitivity to him that
Without a doubt.
wasn't it wasn't as apparent on those first two records. So yeah, I can see that.
I mean, it's the kind of thing where, you know, they may put on a 2 hour blistering crazy set down at the rock show, but he still may like climb over your fence and serenade you with a 5 string acoustic at 4 in the morning and sing, you know, still be able to deliver a song like that, you know. Or
Right.
what was the other one that I always think of? It's not on this record, but it'll come to me later. I'm all in this record right now, but
Sure, sure.
it's easy to picture.
Yeah, no, for sure. Especially at this point, because like now they're doing that. Now they're making it
Yeah,
more apparent that they can actually have like a ballad-ish thing.
yeah, yeah,
So the next song is "We're Coming Out."
yeah,
Now, I love this song. This is a great song. This song is like Paul at his best fuck all attitude, kind of
yeah,
showing he and the band give it their all and at the same time could give a shit less what happens with their career.
yeah.
And I think that lyrically, that's kind of like what they're stating, kind of.
I tend to agree with that, and I think that this. I've always felt like this song um, kind of bridged backwards to "Sorry Ma" and like that kind of that kind of delivery that it's hard to ignore. And there are days when it'll hit just right with me, and I'll realize, oh shit, maybe this is one of my favorite songs on the record.
Okay. So two things about this song. I have two questions for you. Considering what we've already discussed about this song and kind of like the replacements at this point in their career,
Yeah,
when did you start to notice Centro-matic was starting to be sustainable? That you were coming out, if you will.
goodness, probably 5, 6 years into the band when we finally started touring pretty regularly throughout the states
Yeah. And like
and
which
finally
records were out by that point?
going over to Europe. So it would probably have been like the all the falsest hearts can try, to distance and climb, to definitely to love you just the same. Like by the time we started touring love you just the same, um, it felt like, all right, we've kind of got a pattern and a rhythm down with this at this point, with
Hmm.
both the States and Europe was starting to come together in a cool way. Um, I didn't necessarily feel like I didn't have delusions of breaking, you know, what do they call it, blowing up. I didn't
Sure.
have delusions of that necessarily, but I did feel like our we were finally discovering our crowd, you know,
Right.
city to city, and making those connections, and that was deeply important to us. It was really satisfying for sure.
Right. Question two. This song reminds me of one of your songs off of Candidate Waltz.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
all the talkers.
Yeah.
So, what is that
Never
song
thought
about, or who is that song about?
it's not really about any. It is not aimed at any crowd. I can specifically say it is not aimed at any crowd or any one night experience. I think it's just one of those.
Yeah.
It's it's honestly it's truly an experience that I've had more from the spectator side of a lot of shows than the
Hmm.
performance side,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that feeling of, you know, you're catching up about your workday or your flag football game, or what shoes are important to you, or who's going to get the next round, and you're missing a really good show right here in front of you,
Well,
right
see,
here in
because
front of you.
the first thing that sticks out to me is you describing the band getting to the gig. So
Yeah.
that's it. Like, I've always kind of seen it as the perspective of like either the speaker witnessing this band just coming off the road and getting into the gig and trying to, like, just get in and set up and play in a hurry, or
Yeah.
that they just, and kind of almost like describing what the Replacements kind of sounded like this just disheveled group just pushing through doors fast and just kind of like not
Yeah.
giving a fuck who's around and just getting up there
Yeah,
and
I mean,
starting to play.
probably on the road so deep that they may not even know what town they're in,
Right.
if tested. So it's definitely a working class clock in kind of
Yeah.
song, and that is one of those things. Like, you load into a club on tour and you don't know who you're going to be facing every night, if they're going to be ornery or if they're going to be adoring. It's hard to know sometime, and the deeper in you get into touring years, not just a singular tour, but touring years, sometimes the more foggy and murky, and sometimes the foggier that can get, and the more exhausting, and so it's a little bit of I took notes on, after a few shows, maybe a couple of rough tours, and it caused me to put that song together.
Okay.
But again, I've found that as I was writing it, I wasn't necessarily wholly addressing it from a performing standpoint, but also just a number of shows I've been to where maybe the band's playing quiet music, or maybe the songwriter, the solo person up there, just enduring a crowd that won't shut up. And that's a frustration that so many of us have dealt with as showgoers and as spectators.
Sure.
And so, in a way, I wanted it to be seen. I hope for that song to be interpreted in that regard as well, because sometimes that's the way it goes.
Right. Yeah. Especially with your line of music. I mean, especially now as a solo performer. I mean, and you do so many of these living room shows where I've been to one at least now so far, and it's just like, it's incredibly intimate. It's incredibly quiet. It's just like, if anyone is talking in the room, I mean, you're going to hear them.
Oh yeah, there's nowhere to hide that stuff out at a living room show. So you got to head out to the backyard, porch, or whatever.
So the song after that is Androgynous.
Right.
And I love this song. I think it's an incredibly beautiful and kind of prophetic and poignant song. But I also don't have a question for you for this song.
That's all right. I mean, I don't have a whole lot to throw in, other than something that I had not really encountered in music quite yet. Right. And being, living in a pretty conservative town in Texas in the Reagan era, in a time where it was like the machismo of it felt like rock and roll was largely it involved straight dudes singing about girls, and there was a machismo to it that was all over the airwaves, FM in particular, just rock and roll stations at the time, that kind of it made that song really important to me, because it again, it was an enlightenment of sorts. Like, you just didn't hear folks singing about that kind of thing very often. I mean, I had never heard anybody singing about that at that time. And again, I'm coming from a pretty small town that was fed a diet of FM rock, and not a lot got to it. I mean, I didn't really get into Bowie until the early mid 80s. I didn't, I wasn't there listening to him in the late 70s that much, just because it didn't really get to us in Southeast Missouri. So thinking back, a 14-year-old hearing a song like Androgynous, it was definitely it was eye-opening for sure. A 14-year-old of the Reagan era, usually just battered by male-dominated FM rock.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. No, I can imagine. So let's move on to the next song, Black Diamond.
Yeah.
Now I know you were a Kiss fan.
I was, yeah. I mean, I don't know that I was a fan of the music as much as I was just a fan of the whole thing. I mean, just the spectacle of it fascinated me as a youngster. And there was a time where I was so fixated just on just the whole spectacle of it. Like you say, I probably couldn't have named 10 Kiss songs at the time, but I was so fixated that my older stepbrother, my mother was married a couple of times, and I inherited a couple of stepbrothers for a couple of years, and one of them would dress me up as Gene Simmons and send me out on my bicycle just on a November or Tuesday afternoon. Yeah. Not Halloween or anything like that. He would just dress me up as Gene Simmons and send me on my way. So the Kiss fixation and the lights and the smoke and the costumes and all that it hit pretty hard at that time.
Yeah.
And then later I discovered these songs aren't that great. Although I do like Black Diamond quite a lot. There's something pretty satisfying about it.
Huh. Okay.
But,
you mean this cover or the Kiss's original?
I like both.
Okay.
I like both quite a lot. Yeah, the later the years got, and I would look back on those songs, I would think these are not the greatest chants. But that's not what it was about.
Right.
I can't say that for the long term I was terribly into the music. I had certain songs that were kind of cool, but sure. When you're 6 years old, you're not looking for lyrical content. I mean, whatever. I was really into cartoons and wrestling, and so the Kiss thing made sense to my 6 or 7 year old brain. It was like, oh, that's neat. Those are elaborate costumes, and this is an ultimate big concert experience, and that's interesting to me.
Sure.
But yeah, as time goes, you realize, all right, well, I need a little more substance in the lyrics.
Right. In an interview with Peter Jesperson, manager of the band and owner of Twin Tone Records, he discussed how the band had done a few covers for the album. Ultimately, they decided on this track because it was uncool and unexpected.
Yeah.
Have I ever heard you do a cover?
Oh, goodness, I don't know. Yeah, from time to time. Centro-matic would do covers every now and again, especially toward the end. We'd start covering, cover Save It for Later by the English Beat, or Money Changes Everything, stuff like that. But
okay.
we didn't lean on covers too terribly much, just the fact that we really spent a lot of time trying to learn our own songs.
And write so many songs.
Digging deeper into the catalog, just like, you know what, we never learned how to play that song. We should definitely try to figure out a new way to embody it. So we would spend more time, honestly, just trying to learn our own songs.
Oh, okay.
And I know that sounds like a joke, but there was, we put out a lot of records in a pretty short amount of time, and there wasn't always. We were not one of those bands that rehearsed religiously. We tried that, I think, early on, but then we started touring so much that the rehearsing really started taking place kind of on tour and during sound checks and things like that.
Yeah.
And we started realizing that time together was becoming more and more limited. So why not spend time dusting off this old song that we all like collectively, but we just never got around to. And I always wanted to be able to just peel off cool covers of, I don't know, Urgent by Foreigner or something like that, but we just didn't do it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, because that was the follow-up question, was that what is your feeling towards covers, and was there ever one that kind of really spoke to you that you kind of wanted to do?
Oh goodness. It was usually a song that was out of my. It was always something that was just out of my skill set. Maybe a Prince song or something like that, something that was unattainable from the guitar playing standpoint. So it was all fantasy.
It was just
all
something
fantasy.
As a challenge, just something that you would see as a challenge for yourself, not something that you thought would be entertaining for an audience.
Oh, it'd be entertaining on a comedic level, but not on a real we're gonna impress you level.
Right. So, Unsatisfied is the next song.
Yeah.
Uh, Another great one. By the end of the song, Paul goes on repeating he's unsatisfied. What do you consider unsatisfying about the music business?
Oh my goodness. What do I consider unsatisfying
Yes.
about it
Yes.
at this point in time?
Sure.
Streaming companies taking advantage of musicians for billions of dollars would be a slight dissatisfaction.
Mm. Yeah, that sounds about right.
This may be a different show, though.
Yeah. Well, that's a whole other conversation. Really.
That might be a whole nother thing. That
Yeah.
might be a
Okay. Well,
series.
we can come back for another hour some other time.
Yeah, there's some unsatisfying things about that.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Going back to this song, though, I mean, this is similar to Favorite Thing in a way, in that it's an open book, and it's definitely it's a, you know it's an admission to,
Hmm.
and it takes a lot of guts to travel through a couple of choruses saying I'm so unsatisfied over and over.
Right.
It was There's something rather emotional about that, especially within his delivery and with that rasp, to the point where, this is one of the most emotionally raw songs still to me, not just back then, because it definitely spoke to my confused adolescent heart, but also, uh, even still, it rings true in so many ways. I think it applies to various stages of our lives, um, and the way that it's delivered and the way that it wraps up it still makes it one of my favorite songs of all time.
I would agree. I think that's a very
Yeah,
strong one for this record, for sure. We're gonna move on to the next song, Senior Video.
yeah,
So this one's a little strange. Here we have some like very straightforward, aggressive calling out of disingenuine, phony rock and roll.
yeah.
Um,
Well, we're 3 years into the MTV generation at this point, and
right.
there's plenty of it carded before our eyes at this point in history.
Oh,
And
sure.
so it's another reaction against that uh, that promotional tool, I guess, and a lot of the silliness with what's going on within videos, and a lot of the theatrical production, and a lot of the, oh goodness, storyboarding and all that stuff. It's a middle finger to all of it,
Right.
and I love that. I love that so much, especially from a band who would later release a video into the world with just an LP playing next to a speaker, and that was it.
Right.
The whole video.
So, I mean, so in relation to something like that connection to a video that Replacement's actually done themselves.
Yeah.
I've seen some of your videos, and I really like what I've seen. What are the pros and cons of making videos?
Oh man. Um, that's the it's a case by case basis, I think. Sometimes I look back on some of the videos and think, man, that was a really, really fun experience. And then there
Yeah.
are other, situations like, we probably could have stood to do that a little bit different. Um,
Right.
I'm definitely not a particularly good actor or anything like that. So it's literally a video to video kind of thing. I always liked the videos that Matt Pence would call tour footage, and manage to get some excerpts of life or days on the road into the video, and it was almost you know uh, it was almost a journalistic approach to touring in its way. But a lot of
Sure.
people want to know, or they have questions, especially if it's like a European tour in a location that they don't find themselves in all that often. It's interesting to see excerpts of the Spanish landscape, or city streets in Brussels, or things like that.
Mm-hmm.
There are just these pieces of eye candy that Matt Pence was great at putting together, and he assembled a lot of that into a video called ISO Residue, which is a pretty fast edit kind of video, but it documented some of our days on the road, and I thought in an accurate way. So that's one that comes to mind that I kind of liked, but it didn't necessarily have a storyboard or anything like that.
Right, right.
So I don't know. Each one kind of has its own story and its own reason for coming together in the way that it did.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So I only got a couple more for you.
Sure.
We're gonna skip Gary's Got a Boner.
Yeah.
Song after that would be 16 Blue.
16
So,
Blues. Sorry,
no, go
it's
ahead.
another. Like, I feel like I'm beating the subject here, but I think we are getting to a theme with the record. It's another one that really like kind of hit on the adolescent crossroads, that adolescent confusion,
Mm-hmm.
and it's
So I found that this song is allegedly about Tommy Stinson, uh, considering he was around that age at this time, at the
yeah,
time of this recording, which is pretty
yeah.
impressive. 16-year-old kid in this band already put out 3 records by this point. So you were probably around this uncomfortable age when you got turned on to this. I mean, you already told me that you were about 14.
Yeah.
So does this album speak to you in the same way that it did then, or how has it changed for you now?
Well, when I went on and kind of moved on down the line into late teens, early 20s, I wondered if it was going to mean the same thing to me, later in life that it did at say age 14. And like you mentioned, the production's pretty all over the place in its way, and it definitely sounds, it sounds a piece of the time, but the messages within, I think, still resonate with me in that this was part of a real awakening. This record was, and a number of other records alongside of it at
Mm-hmm.
this particular time, was a real awakening that music could be done in this different way than I was kind of conditioned to understanding by just popular culture, by MTV, by FM radio in Southeast Missouri, um, and even in Central Texas. It just told me that music could be done a different way, and that you could be raw and like uncertain and vulnerable and unpredictable, and that was okay.
Right.
Um, in a way, it made fans like me connect even quicker, because, like I mentioned, it felt like these guys lived down the block. I felt the same with Husker Du.
Yeah.
Man, I feel like I know these people for reasons similar to my connection with this record. Is why I fell so in love with Dinosaur Jr. and the Butthole
Mm.
Surfers, and of course the Husker Du, Husker and Bob Mould and Sonic Youth. Like it was all one buffet of enlightenment in its way,
Mm.
that showed a lot of us that you didn't have to be Aerosmith to really have a go at music, and to
Right.
make a connection with fans, and to
Yeah.
have meaningful relationships and meaningful connections with your fan base.
Hmm. That's funny. I think that there's an association that I make with what you just said. Like if you compare the older generation, like the guys that were already on MTV by this point in the '80s, when that you saw, the like all those older bands, older guys, all say the same thing. Where it was just like the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show was the
Yeah.
turning point in their lives, where they're like, we needed to start a band. Like that was
Yep.
like our call to say we can do this ourselves.
Yeah.
We want to do this. It seems that like this generation of punk rock music from the Twin Tone and SST and so forth was also that other turning point, turning on a whole other generation and showing them a path of
Yeah.
of creation of a way to be.
That's right. And I think this is, relative to every musician, every band out there that's really decided to have a long term go at music. Everybody, like, there's nothing special about my story. It's just that this is my turning point,
Yeah.
where I realized, man, I want to make a life out of this. I really connect with this. We all have our crossroads where we discover that thing, that one record, or that one band that just is that pathway to, oh man, you know what? I think I want to. I think I can do this. And this was just my particular juncture where I found that feeling, and that music provided this other thing to just kind of put all my weight on and spend my time with.
All right. All right. Well, let's wrap this up. The last song is "Answering Machine."
Yeah.
So
Again, under the blanket of, mid '80s technology, but also a love song in its way. There's something romantic, very romantic about this.
absolutely, yeah. And even though there's that kind of disconnection, in today's technology, the feeling is the same.
Yep. And
So I don't think there's any good way to approach this topic. So let me start by saying I've personally recognized the difficulty of being separated geographically from a partner
yeah,
recently, and because like my wife actually just took off to North Carolina for a few days because her father is not well. He's passing.
right.
And then a friend of mine recently posted on Instagram acknowledging that he was leaving his partner because he was going on tour as well, and like all the difficulties
Yeah.
she was suffering while he was gone, and it was only within a short time. Like he just started tour.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's the difficulty of being a touring musician and the burden that lifestyle can propose. How do you deal?
Oh goodness. That's day to day. I mean, there are certain days on the road or on tour that are deeply satisfying and really rewarding through the act of performance, or just getting to, I don't know, take a nice walk before the show, just the simplest of things.
Hmm.
And then there are other days and patches that are riddled with unbelievable homesickness. And so it really is kind of a day-to-day kind of thing. I'm still attracted to the interaction with the world, and getting out into the world and learning more about it, interacting with people, and enjoying conversations and enjoying connections through touring. But it can't happen for the same lengths of time that it used to 15 or 20 years ago, when we would just go to Europe for 6 or 8 weeks and
Mm-hmm.
do nothing but tour. I can't do it like I used to. Now it's, maximum 3 weeks, because I just miss everybody. I want to be home. I miss my wife and my kids, and this is my main community. So it's different. And I think with the sentiment of Answering Machine, it's something that relates through the ages. It's obviously the title itself is a bit of a souvenir, a technological souvenir of the time.
Mm-hmm.
But that feeling is as old as time itself, and
Sure.
And that longing. And so I think that sentiment still hits hard at times now if I hear that song. But again, like there's just a sentiment, there's a longing and an unrequited sort of mood to this particular song that that floored me at the start, but I still think it resonates. I mean, if I hear it now, I still stop. And it doesn't matter if I'm in a bar or wherever. It's just one of those songs that gets me.
Oh yeah, I agree. I mean, it's an extremely powerful song. I mean, I think that everyone can relate to a degree when you're in a band and you've been on tour. Like it kind of hits a different nerve. So I can imagine how it might make you feel.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't even think about the touring from the touring perspective so much as I do like when this song was in such heavy rotation in my teenage life, just like going through a crummy breakup.
Oh yeah.
Knowing that my I guess now ex-girlfriend was probably out on a date with her new dude, and I'd call and he would the answer machine would pick up. It was like, the song, it's a little too close to home right now.
Yeah. Now they just ghost you. Now they don't respond to texts.
That's right.
It's a different kind of pain now.
Yeah, it's a different kind of pain now.
So on that note, as far as the sentiment of Answering Machine, you have a tour coming up very soon.
Yeah, starting today Thursday, starting a week from tonight in Nashville with my friend John Moreland.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And it's just a few dates.
universe allowing, hopefully everything will pan out. But I'm really looking forward to playing music again for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I saw that you're actually going to be at the Sinclair on the 24th.
That's right. Yeah.
So I hope to be there. I still have to grab my ticket.
Well, I might have guest spots, so I got to check my allotments. But don't buy tickets yet before you. I don't know. Check in with me in a day or two, and
Okay.
let me see what kind of guest spots I've got.
Hey, I mean, not a problem at all either way. I mean, I'm happy to support. Obviously,
Cool. Yeah.
I buy all the records when I can and so forth and everything else. I do
Thank
everything
you.
I can for you.
Man, thank you very, very much. I really appreciate it. I'm ever grateful.
Not a problem, man. I mean, you are certainly one of the greatest. I mean, I don't try to say that like to get all mushy on you, but I mean like you're one of my favorite musicians. Like honestly,
Thank you.
it's been a great honor to have you on here and actually talk about a record that's important to you.
I really enjoyed it. Thanks for letting me talk about this record. It's been an interesting walk down a pretty important path of memories, uh, and it's one of the reasons that we're here. It's one of the reasons I chose to that band is one of the reasons that I chose to give music a chance. That really giving songwriting a shot.
Yeah. Well,
I remember
I'm sure it
having that
proves
conversation.
to be that important to you. I mean, like just the insight that you've given on it. Obviously, your experiences and just the association between what you create and what this record is. Kind of the
Yeah.
similarity between the two. I mean, it's kind of the reason why I do this.
Yeah, it's those connections and those trajectories are super important to me, and they're always kind of fascinating to track. So
Hmm.
uh, I don't know. I had that conversation with Bob Mould maybe 2 or 3 years ago when we were on tour together, and we've done a couple of tours together now to where I consider him a friend. But early on, and those pre-show sitting backstage, just having supper, there were no crews, no other band members or anything. It was just us doing the tour, and I kind of had to get it out of my system, pick my battle, and like use my 90 seconds to say, look, you're part of the reason I'm here, and the records
Right.
that you've put out over the last 40 years, 38 years at the time, whatever the case was,
Yeah.
are largely the reason that I chose to do music and chose to give it a shot. So thank you. And now that I've said that, we can go back to talking about other, you know, funny bullshit or whatever the case was. But I needed to at least state my thanks as best I could
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah. I
I had
mean,
to kind of take it carefully, but he's another beacon that was the reason that I gave it a shot. So,
yeah. Yeah. Is that hard to kind of be able to share a bill and a venue and a stage with someone that's so important?
no, it's enjoyable because I get to watch a great show every night. Selfishly, I get to
Right.
wrap up my set and then go take my spot against the back wall near the merch and watch another fantastic show by one of my favorite songwriters. So it's about the easiest thing ever. It's a really great way to live.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And so you never had an experience with Paul Westerberg, huh?
Other than pulling his hair when he jumped in the crowd in 1989, no, not at all.
I'm
I
sure
think
he
I'll leave it
remembers
at
that.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure it resonated mightily with him. So,
Well, I think
uh,
he's retired now. Like
I think by and large, yeah.
his existing manager lives in Rhode Island, and I think
Yeah.
I've heard him say that he's kind of like unofficially retired. Like he hasn't made any declaration of such, but he's not really
Yeah.
doing anything.
I find that easy to believe. I mean, I kind of feel like that's been the case for the greater part for a little while now. But,
Hmm.
or at least I would have guessed that. Um, Good grief. I mean, the pandemic itself has, forced a lot of hands in that regard, and at
Oh yeah.
least like caused a lot of soul searching. Like, do I really have to or need to do this anymore? And I sympathize with that for sure. I know a friend of mine's good buddies with John Doe from X, and he's like, he was stating that John was like, I don't know, maybe I'm retired now, maybe this is done. but at the same time, I don't know. I guess as a fan, it's kind of sad to hear things like that. But I can never fault anybody for saying, look, I don't want to plow this field anymore. For as weird as the life and music has become,
right?
I totally get it, man. I respect that to the fullest extent.
Yeah, well, he's put in plenty of years, so I mean, if he wants to retire and hang it up, that's, I think he's done more than his fair share of work. So.
Yeah, he brought a lot. He brought a lot to us, so we should be grateful for what's there.
Yeah, I think so. Well, I look forward to seeing you very soon, Will.
Yeah, definitely. Hopefully I'll see you in a couple of weeks in Boston. I really appreciate the conversation, and thanks for the invite.
Absolutely. Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
All right.